The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of courtroom 7A, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floors. Judge Rajesh Kumar adjusted his black robes as he prepared for another day of hearings. After 30 years on the bench, the familiar routine brought him comfort, the weight of his robes, the solid feel of his gavel, and the quiet respect that filled the room whenever he entered. His daughter Priya sat in her downtown office, preparing for a major corporate case, unaware that her world was about to turn upside down. A talented lawyer at age 32, she had built her reputation through hard work and determination, always mindful of living up to her father's legacy of integrity. The day started like any other. Judge Kumar was presiding over a property dispute when he noticed unusual movement at the courtroom's entrance. 3 men in dark suits entered silently, their badges catching the morning light. His heart skipped a beat, but he maintained his composure, years of judicial experience keeping his expression neutral. "Your Honor," the lead agent spoke, his voice echoing in the suddenly silent courtroom. "I apologize for the interruption, but we need you to step down from the bench." The words fell like heavy stones in the quiet room. The news spread through the courthouse like wildfire. Judge Kumar, one of the most respected figures in the judicial system, was being accused of accepting bribes to manipulate verdicts in 5 major cases. The allegations claimed he had received over $2 million through offshore accounts. Priya was in the middle of a client meeting when her phone started buzzing incessantly. Messages flooded in from colleagues, friends, and reporters. When she finally saw the news alert, her coffee cup slipped from her hands, shattering on the floor. The headline screamed, "Veteran judge arrested on corruption charges." The media circus erupted immediately. News vans crowded the courthouse steps, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metal trees. Reporters shoved microphones in front of shell-shocked courthouse employees, hungry for any detail about the judge's arrest. Judge Kumar walked out of the courthouse, flanked by federal agents, his head held high despite the circumstances. The camera flashes created a strobing effect as reporters shouted questions. "Judge Kumar, did you take the bribes? How long have you been corrupting the justice system? What do you say to the families affected by your tainted verdicts?" Back in her office, Priya watched the footage in horror. Her father, the man who had taught her about justice and integrity since she was old enough to understand the words, was being treated like a common criminal. She remembered sitting in his study as a child, watching him review cases late into the night, his commitment to fairness evident in every decision he made. The phone rang. It was her mother, Anjali, her voice trembling but determined. "They've taken him to the federal building downtown. He's asking for you, beta." The words hit Priya like a physical blow. Of course he would ask for her. She was not just his daughter anymore. She was a lawyer capable of understanding the storm that was about to engulf their family. As Priya gathered her things to leave, her senior partner appeared in her doorway. "Take whatever time you need," he said kindly, but she could see the concern in his eyes. Concern not just for her, but for the firm's reputation by association. The drive to the federal building was a blur of emotions. Anger at whoever had orchestrated this. Fear for her father's future. Determination to uncover the truth. But mostly, a deep, burning need to protect the man who had always protected her. The usually bustling streets seemed to mock her with their normalcy. People walked their dogs, bought coffee, lived their lives, while her family's world was shattering into pieces. She caught glimpses of her father's face on news tickers scrolling across buildings, each one a fresh wound. As she parked her car, Priya took a deep breath and looked at herself in the rearview mirror. She saw not just the polished lawyer she had become, but the daughter of a man who had spent his life serving justice. In that moment, she made a decision. She would take on her father's case herself, no matter the cost to her career or reputation. The security guards at the federal building recognized her from news photos already circulating. Their eyes held a mix of curiosity and judgment as they waved her through the metal detectors. The weight of what was to come pressed down on her shoulders, but she straightened her spine, channeling her father's quiet strength. This was just the beginning of a battle that would test not just her legal skills, but the very foundations of her relationship with her father. As she walked toward the interview room where he waited, Priya knew that everything she had learned, everything she believed in, would be put to the ultimate test. The Kumar family's dining room had never felt so tense. The same table where they had shared countless happy meals now felt like a battlefield. Priya sat across from her father, legal documents spread between them like a barrier. The evening shadows grew longer as they faced their most challenging conversation yet. "I won't let you sacrifice your career for me," Judge Kumar said firmly, pushing away the papers Priya had carefully prepared. His voice carried the same authority he used in court, but Priya could hear the slight tremor beneath it. "You've worked too hard to get where you are." Anjali walked in with a tray of chai, the familiar aroma of cardamom and ginger filling the room. She set it down carefully, her bangles quietly jingling. "Your father thinks he's protecting you," she said to Priya, then turned to her husband. "But sometimes parents need to let their children fight for them." Outside, reporters still camped at the end of their driveway, their cameras ready to pounce on any family member who stepped out. The news channels kept replaying the footage of Judge Kumar's arrest, each replay feeling like a fresh wound to the family. Priya wrapped her hands around the warm cup of chai, gathering her thoughts. "Dad, do you remember what you told me when I lost my first moot court competition in law school?" She waited until he met her eyes. "You said that real strength isn't in winning easy battles, but in fighting for what's right, especially when it's hard." The morning papers lay scattered on the table, their headlines screaming accusations. Judge Kumar's phone kept buzzing with messages from former colleagues, some offering support, others quietly distancing themselves. Each notification made him flinch slightly, though he tried to hide it. "Your law firm," he started, but Priya cut him off. "I've already spoken with them. They've put me on leave." She didn't mention the whispered conversations that had stopped when she walked into the office, or the pitying looks from her colleagues as she packed up her desk. "This isn't just about your case, Dad. This is about everything you've taught me, everything I believe in." Anjali sat down beside her husband, taking his hand. The simple gesture seemed to deflate some of his resistance. "Listen to her," she said softly. "She's not just your little girl anymore. She's a lawyer who knows what she's talking about." The evening news droned on in the background, discussing the fall from grace of one of the city's most respected judges. Priya got up and switched it off, the silence that followed feeling almost peaceful. "They're saying I took bribes in the Raman construction case," Judge Kumar said finally, his voice heavy. "And the Singh family custody battle. 3 other cases too." He looked at his daughter. "These are complex cases, Priya. The evidence they claim to have is circumstantial at best," Priya finished, pulling out her laptop. "I've already started reviewing the cases. There's something not adding up about the timing of these accusations." She opened a timeline she'd created, dates and events carefully mapped out. A knock at the door made them all jump. It was Dev, Priya's younger brother, finally arrived from his tech job in Bangalore. His usual cheerful face was drawn with worry. "Sorry I couldn't get here sooner," he said, hugging each family member in turn. "The media is going crazy with this story, even back there." The family dynamic shifted with Dev's arrival. He had always been the peacemaker, the one who could break tension with a well-timed joke. But today, he just listened as Priya laid out her plans for their father's defense. "You'll need help," Dev said finally. "I can take leave from work, help with research, managing the media." He looked at his sister with determination. "We're in this together." Judge Kumar looked at his children, pride mixing with fear in his eyes. These weren't the carefree kids who once played in his courthouse after hours. They were adults, ready to fight for him, even as his world crumbled. Priya started organizing the documents, her legal training kicking in. "First, we need to understand exactly what evidence they claim to have. Then we track down everyone involved in these 5 cases. Someone's lying, and we're going to find out who." As the night grew deeper, the family began to work together. Anjali brought more chai and started cooking dinner, the familiar sounds and smells from the kitchen providing comfort. Dev set up his laptop, starting to compile news reports and social media reactions. Judge Kumar finally began talking, sharing details about the cases in question. Priya watched her family rally together and felt a mix of love and determination. This crisis had shaken their world, but it hadn't broken them. As she looked at her father across the table, now actively engaged in building his defense, she saw not just the respected judge, but a man fighting for his life's work, his reputation, his truth. The path ahead would be difficult, but they would walk it together. Outside, the media vultures might circle, and friends might doubt, but in this room, truth and family stood strong. As midnight approached, Pryor began to see the first glimmers of how they might fight this battle, not just in the courtroom, but in the court of public opinion, in the face of doubt, and against whatever forces had brought these false accusations against her father. The clock on Pryor's laptop showed 3:27 a.m., but she barely noticed. Her makeshift office in her childhood bedroom was covered with papers, sticky notes, and empty coffee cups. The soft glow of her desk lamp cast shadows on the case files spread around her. She had been staring at bank statements for hours, trying to trace the alleged bribe money. "You should get some sleep," Dev said from the doorway, his own eyes red from hours of computer work. He had set up a system to track every news article, social media mention, and public record related to their father's cases. "Just 5 more minutes," Pryor mumbled, a phrase that reminded them both of their school days. But this wasn't homework she was dealing with now, it was their father's life. A pattern was emerging from the chaos of documents. In each of the 5 cases where Judge Kumar was accused of taking bribes, there was a connection to a company called Sunshine Enterprises. It seemed too perfect to be a coincidence. The next morning, Pryor walked into the courthouse where she'd watched her father work countless times. Now she was here as an investigator, not a proud daughter. The clerk, Mr. Verma, who had known her since she was a child, gave her a sad smile as he helped her access the old case files. "Your father," Mr. Verma said quietly, looking around to make sure they were alone. "He always took extra time with property cases. Said they affected real people's lives, not just their pockets." He pulled out another file. "These are the notes from the Raman construction case. Not officially part of the record, but—" Pryor thanked him with grateful eyes. Back in her car, she opened the unofficial notes. Her father's familiar handwriting filled the margins with observations, questions, and concerns about the Raman case. One name kept appearing: Sunshine Enterprises. At home, Dev was excited about his own discovery. "Look at this," he said, pulling up financial records on his screen. Sunshine Enterprises was registered just 2 months before the first alleged bribe. And guess who owns it? It's a shell company leading back to Vista Properties. Pryor felt her heart race. Vista Properties was owned by Vikram Kapoor, one of the city's biggest real estate developers. Her father had ruled against him in several major cases over the years. She drove to the sites mentioned in the Raman case. Where there should have been affordable housing, luxury apartments now stood. The construction workers there told stories of old buildings mysteriously catching fire, of residents being pressured to sell. Back at her laptop, Pryor started connecting the dots. Each case where her father was accused of taking bribes had blocked Vista Properties' attempts to acquire prime real estate. The alleged bribes were supposed to have made him rule in their favor, but he never had. "It doesn't make sense," she told her mother that evening. "Why would someone accuse Dad of taking bribes to rule in their favor when all his judgments went against them?" Anjali, who had been quietly supporting her family through this crisis, looked up from her cooking. "Sometimes, Beta, people care more about destroying others than helping themselves." The breakthrough came at midnight. Dev discovered a pattern of similar accusations against other judges across the state, all of whom had ruled against Vista Properties. Most cases were quickly dropped, but the judges' reputations were damaged enough for them to step down or transfer. Pryor's phone rang. It was her old friend Rohan from law school, now working at the tax authority. "You need to see this," he said without greeting. "I'm sending you some documents about Vista Properties' tax submissions. There are discrepancies, large ones." The documents arrived, and Pryor's hands shook as she read them. Vista Properties had been channeling money through multiple shell companies, including Sunshine Enterprises. The amounts matched the alleged bribes almost exactly, but the money had never gone to her father's accounts. She rushed to her father's study, where he sat reading old case files. "Dad, remember when you ruled on the Singh family custody case? Was there any pressure from Vista Properties?" Judge Kumar looked up, his eyes tired but alert. Vikram Kapoor wanted to buy their property. The children's grandfather refused to sell. Winning custody of the children would have given them control of the estate. He paused. "I ruled in favor of the grandfather." Pryor worked through the night, tracking connections. A pattern emerged. Vista Properties would target prime properties, pressure owners to sell, and when that failed, they would find other ways to gain control. When judges stood in their way, mysterious accusations would appear. The morning sun was rising when Pryor finally organized all her evidence. The story was clear now. Her father wasn't being accused because he took bribes, but because he refused to be corrupted. Vista Properties had a pattern of destroying judges who wouldn't bow to their pressure. Dev appeared with fresh coffee. "I'd found something else," he said. Social media posts attacking Dad started appearing 2 days before the official investigation. All from accounts created in the last month, all following the same pattern as attacks on other judges. Pryor looked at her evidence wall, where strings connected newspaper clippings, documents, and photos. This wasn't just about clearing their father anymore, it was about exposing a system that punished honest judges and rewarded corruption. "We need to be careful," she told Dev. "Vikram Kapoor didn't build his empire by playing nice. When we move on this, we need to be absolutely sure of every detail." As if to confirm her words, a car drove slowly past their house, its tinted windows reflecting the morning sun. The same car she'd noticed outside her office yesterday. The game was getting dangerous, but Pryor felt more determined than ever. They weren't just fighting for their father now, they were fighting for justice itself. Pryor stared at her office computer screen, her heart pounding. The email had arrived minutes ago. "Drop the investigation, or your father's reputation won't be the only thing destroyed." The sender's address was untraceable, but the threat was crystal clear. She glanced out her window at the street below. The same black car was there again, its tinted windows hiding whoever watched her office. Her hand shook slightly as she picked up her phone to call Dev. "They're getting nervous," Dev said when she told him about the email. "That means we're getting close." His voice carried a forced cheerfulness that didn't quite mask his concern. "I've backed up all our evidence to secure servers. They can't make it disappear." Later that afternoon, Pryor met her friend Amit, a journalist she trusted, at a busy coffee shop. The noise of customers and grinding coffee beans made their conversation private. "Someone's been calling the paper," Amit said, sliding a notebook across the table. "They're offering dirt on you. Claims you helped your father hide evidence in old cases." Pryor felt sick. She had expected attacks on her father, but now they were coming for her too. The notebook contained details about her past cases, twisted to look suspicious. They had even dug up a photo of her at a party with a client from 3 years ago, trying to suggest impropriety. At home, she found her mother in tears. "They called the hospital," Anjali said, wiping her eyes. "They're reviewing my position on the medical board." She had been a respected pediatrician at the city hospital for 20 years. "They say it's routine, but—" Judge Kumar sat in his study, looking older than his years. "Perhaps if I resign," he started, but Pryor cut him off. "That's exactly what they want," she said firmly. "Vikram Kapoor has been doing this for years. Pressure the family, destroy reputations, make honest people quit. Not this time." Dev burst in, his laptop open. "You need to see this. I've been tracking money movements through Sunshine Enterprises. They've made donations to every major media outlet in the city. That's why the coverage has been so biased." Pryor's phone buzzed, another message. This one included a photo of her leaving her boyfriend Arjun's apartment last week. The message was simple. "What would people think if they knew you were dating a key witness's cousin?" She hadn't even known Arjun was related to someone involved in the cases. When she called him, his voice was distant, uncomfortable. "Maybe we should take a break," he said. "My family's business can't handle this kind of attention." That night, the family gathered in the living room, their usual dinner replaced by a strategy session. Maps and documents covered every surface. Dev had created a complex chart showing all of Vikram Kapoor's business connections. "He's on every major development board in the city," Dev explained, pointing to his screen. "Shopping malls, office complexes, luxury apartments, all built where community housing used to be. And look who approved the zoning changes." The names on the screen told the story of corruption. Planning commissioners, local politicians, even other judges, all connected to Vista Properties through campaign contributions, consulting fees, or mysterious offshore accounts. A knock at the door made everyone freeze. It was Mr. Verma, the court clerk, looking nervous. "I had to come," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "They offered me money to say I saw your father taking bribes. When I refused," he showed them a photo of his son's school. The threat was unspoken but clear. Priya felt the weight of responsibility growing. It wasn't just her family anymore. Others were being dragged into this web of corruption and threats. She worked late into the night, connecting more dots. Vista Properties had been buying up properties around pending development projects before they were announced. Someone was leaking them insider information. Dev discovered something even more disturbing. The shell companies, he said, showing her his findings. They're not just for bribes. They're laundering money from illegal businesses, gambling dens, smuggling operations. Vikram Kapoor isn't just a corrupt developer, he's running a criminal empire. The next morning, Priya found her car vandalized, all 4 tires slashed. A note on the windshield read, "Last warning." But among the glass shards, she noticed something else, a security camera pointing directly at her parking spot. She rushed to the building management office. The security guard was reluctant at first, but when she mentioned her father's name, his expression changed. "Judge Kumar helped my family once," he said, pulling up the security footage. The video showed 2 men attacking her car at 3 a.m. They were professionals, faces hidden, but one of them dropped something. A membership card to an exclusive club owned by Vista Properties. "They're getting sloppy," Dev said when she showed him the footage. "They're used to people backing down by now. Nobody's ever fought back this hard." Priya stood at her evidence wall, adding new connections. The picture was becoming clearer, but also more dangerous. Vikram Kapoor wasn't just trying to discredit one honest judge. He was protecting a network of corruption that reached into every corner of the city. Her phone rang, an unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Meet me at midnight," a voice said. "I have proof of everything. But after tonight, I'll probably disappear." The line went dead. Priya looked at her family, then at the growing web of evidence on her wall. They were close to breaking this wide open, but the hidden enemy was powerful, desperate, and running out of patience. The next 24 hours would change everything. The hospital corridor felt endless as Priya rushed toward the emergency room. Her father had collapsed during his morning walk, the stress of the past weeks finally taking its toll. Dev had called her during a crucial meeting with a witness, but she had dropped everything and run. Anjali was already there, her doctor's coat replaced by worried wife's anxiety. "His blood pressure is too high," she explained, her medical knowledge making her fear worse. "The doctors want to keep him overnight for observation." Judge Kumar lay in the hospital bed, looking smaller somehow. The TV in his room was showing news about his case, and even here he couldn't escape it. Priya grabbed the remote and turned it off. "I'm fine," he insisted, trying to sit up. "We can't afford to waste time. The hearing is in 3 days." But his hand shook as he reached for the water glass, and Priya had to help him hold it. Back at the office, her team of young lawyers was working through the evidence. She had hired them with her own savings, recent graduates who still believed in justice more than money. But when she walked in, their faces told her something was wrong. The witness backed out. "Rohit, her youngest associate, said quietly. He says he made a mistake, that he never saw the money transfer." The young lawyer looked devastated. "We built half our case on his testimony." Priya sank into her chair, exhaustion washing over her. Her phone buzzed, another message from Arjun. She hadn't replied to his last 5 texts. Their 3-year relationship was crumbling, and she couldn't even find the energy to feel sad about it. Dev appeared at her door, his usual cheerful face serious. "They've started rumors about Mom at the hospital," he said. "Some parents are requesting different doctors for their kids." His voice caught. "She came home crying today." That evening, Priya found her mother in the kitchen, aggressively chopping vegetables. The familiar smell of dinner cooking felt like the only normal thing left in their lives. 20 years, Anjali said, not looking up. 20 years I've treated those children. Now some think I'm part of some criminal family. The doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Sharma from next door, who had been bringing them food every evening since the scandal broke. But today she looked uncomfortable. "My husband thinks maybe we should stop meeting for a while," she said, not meeting Anjali's eyes. "You understand, right? His business." Priya watched her mother's face fall, saw how she tried to hide it with a brave smile. "Of course we understand," Anjali said, but her voice trembled slightly. Another small cut in their daily life, another piece of normalcy stripped away. Later that night, Pryor found old family photos while searching for case documents. There she was at age 7, sitting on her father's shoulders outside the courthouse. Dev at his graduation, their father beaming with pride. Family picnics, birthday parties, festivals, a lifetime of happiness now shattered by doubt. Her phone rang. Arjun again. This time she answered. "My parents want me to end it," he said without preamble. "They're worried about their reputation, their business contacts." He paused. "Maybe they're right. This case, it's consuming everything." "I can't stop," Pryor said softly. "This is bigger than us now." "It's always bigger than us," he replied and hung up. Dev found her crying in her room, surrounded by case files and old photos. Without a word, he sat beside her and started organizing the scattered papers. "Remember when Dad taught us to ride bikes?" he said suddenly. He said falling was part of learning to balance. The next morning, Judge Kumar insisted on coming to the office despite doctor's orders. He sat in Pryor's conference room, reviewing evidence with shaking hands. "Your mother and I had our first date at that restaurant," he said suddenly, pointing at a photo of a building now owned by Vista Properties. It was a small family place then, best butter chicken in the city. Pryor looked at her father, really looked at him. His hair had gone completely gray in the past month. His proud shoulders were stooped, his hands uncertain. But his eyes still held the same determination she'd seen all her life. The young lawyers worked around them, their energy and dedication a reminder of why this fight mattered. One of them, Neha, had turned down a high-paying corporate job to work on this case. "My father is a judge in Pune," she had said. "What happens to your father affects all of us." Anjali brought dinner to the office. She had cooked enough for the whole team. As they ate together, sharing stories and strategies, Pryor felt a strange mix of sadness and hope. They had lost friends, relationships, peace of mind. But they had also found allies, uncovered truth, grown stronger as a family. That night, as Pryor drove her parents home, her father spoke softly. "I'm sorry," he said. "Sorry that my principles have cost this family so much." Anjali reached back and took his hand. "Your principles are why we love you," she said. "They're why our children are who they are." Pryor parked the car and looked at their home, lights still on, Dev visible through the window working at his computer. Their lives had changed, perhaps forever. But as she watched her parents walk hand in hand to the door, she knew that what really mattered remained unbroken. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. New evidence emerges in Judge Kumar case. Tomorrow would bring more battles. But tonight she would sit with her family, share a meal, and remember why they were fighting. Rain pounded against the office windows as Pryor stared at her phone, reading the mysterious message again. "Parking level B3, Heritage Mall, midnight. Come alone. Bring your laptop." The message was from an unknown number, but something about it felt different from the threats they'd been receiving. Dev was against it. "It's obviously a trap," he insisted, pacing her office. "We should inform the police." But they both knew some local officers were on Vikram Kapoor's payroll. Who could they trust? "I'll keep my phone on," Pryor said, gathering her things. "Track my location. If anything seems wrong." She didn't finish the sentence. They both knew the stakes. The Heritage Mall parking garage was eerily quiet at midnight. Pryor's footsteps echoed as she walked past rows of empty cars. Her heart pounded, but she kept moving. Level B3 was the deepest part of the garage, where the security cameras didn't reach. A figure emerged from behind a pillar. Pryor nearly dropped her laptop, but then she recognized him. Rajesh Mehra, Vikram Kapoor's former accountant who had disappeared 3 months ago. "I don't have much time," he said, glancing nervously around. "They're watching my family. But I can't live with this anymore." His hands shook as he pulled out a USB drive. "Everything's here, all the fake companies, all the bribes, all the threats. 10 years of dirty work." Back at the office, Dev worked through the night, copying and analyzing the files. "This is incredible," he kept saying. Bank transfers, email trails, recorded conversations. He kept everything. Morning found them surrounded by printouts and screenshots. The evidence showed how Vista Properties had been destroying honest officials for years. Judges who ruled against them would find their reputations ruined. Police officers who investigated them would be framed for corruption. Journalists who asked questions would lose their jobs. Pryor's phone rang. It was Amit, her journalist friend. Someone broke into my apartment last night, he said, his voice shaking. They took my laptop, my notes. They know I'm helping you. She rushed to his place, finding it ransacked. But the thieves had missed something, a hidden camera Amit had installed after the first threats. The footage showed two men searching his apartment, and one of them was wearing a Vista Properties security uniform. Dev called with more news. Remember that warehouse fire last year? The one that killed 3 people. His voice was excited. The files show Kapoor ordered it. The property owner refused to sell, so they staged an accident. Priya felt sick. This wasn't just about her father anymore. People had died because of Kapoor's greed. She drove to the hospital where her mother worked, needing to clear her head. In the parking lot, she noticed something odd, a familiar black car. The same one that had been following her. Instead of running, she walked toward it. The driver panicked and tried to reverse, but hit another car. When security came running, they found a camera and surveillance equipment inside. The driver was a private investigator hired by Vista Properties. Back at her office, Priya's young team was energized by the new evidence. Neha had found a pattern in the property acquisitions. Look, she said, pointing to a map. Every piece of land they bought through threats or fraud, they knew about development plans before they were public. Someone in the city planning office is helping them. Judge Kumar studied the documents with growing anger. I remember this case, he said, pointing to a file. The owner had a heart attack right before the hearing. I always thought it was strange timing. The pieces were falling into place. Priya and Dev worked with their team, building a timeline of Vista Properties crimes. Property fraud, money laundering, bribery, intimidation, and worse. Then came another breakthrough. One of the young lawyers, Rohit, found something in the email trails. They didn't just frame your father, he said excitedly. Look at these dates. They planned it months ago, right after he blocked their biggest project yet, the riverfront development. Priya remembered that case. Her father had ruled that the project would illegally displace thousands of low-income families. The next day, Vista Properties stock had dropped significantly. That's when they decided to destroy him, Dev said, connecting more dots. But they didn't expect us to fight back this hard. They didn't expect us to find all of this. As evening fell, Priya gathered her team. The evidence was overwhelming. Years of corruption and crime, all documented by a guilty accountant trying to clear his conscience. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You should have taken the warning seriously. Attached was a photo of her father's hospital room, taken that same day. But this time, instead of fear, Priya felt determination. They had tried to intimidate her family, tried to break their spirit. Instead, they had given her the weapon she needed to bring them down. She looked at her wall of evidence, now complete with the final pieces from Rajesh Mehra's files. Tomorrow, she would take this to court. Tomorrow, the truth would come out. Make copies of everything, she told her team. Send them to every news outlet, every law enforcement agency. If they try to bury this, we'll make sure the whole world sees it. Outside her window, the rain had stopped. A new day was coming, and with it, the chance to finally bring justice, not just for her father, but for everyone Vikram Kapoor had hurt. Dev brought her a cup of coffee and smiled. Ready for the big day, sister? Priya looked at the photo of her father on her desk, taken when he first became a judge. They thought they could use the law to destroy him, she said. Instead, we'll use it to destroy them. The courtroom was packed. Every bench was filled, with people standing along the walls. Journalists crowded the back, their cameras ready. Priya stood at the center, facing the 3-judge panel, her heart racing but her voice steady. Your Honors, she began, what you're about to see isn't just about clearing my father's name. It's about exposing a system of corruption that has poisoned our city's justice system for years. In the front row, Judge Kumar sat with Anjali and Dev. Behind them were the faces of everyone who had helped them. Amit the journalist, still sporting a bruise from the break-in. Mr. Verma, the court clerk who had risked his job. The young lawyers who had worked countless nights. Priya started with the evidence from Rajesh Mehra. The accountant himself was now in protective custody after an attempt on his life the previous night had convinced the police this was bigger than they'd thought. Vista Properties didn't just frame my father, Priya said, displaying documents on the court's screens. They've been destroying honest officials for years. Here are the bank records showing payments to fake companies. Here are emails planning the accusations. And here, she paused for effect, are recordings of Vikram Kapoor himself ordering these attacks. A murmur ran through the courtroom. In the back, Priya noticed several police officers quietly entering. They took positions near certain members of the audience, Kapoor's associates, she realized. The riverfront development project was their biggest plan yet, she continued. Worth billions, it would have displaced thousands of families. When my father ruled it illegal, they decided to destroy him. But they made one mistake. She clicked to the next slide showing a timeline. They didn't expect us to fight back. They didn't expect us to find all of this. And they certainly didn't expect their own accountant's conscience to finally break. Suddenly, there was a commotion at the door. Vikram Kapoor himself burst in, flanked by expensive lawyers. "This is all lies," he shouted. "She's making up evidence to save her father." The head judge banged his gavel. "Mr. Kapoor, you will sit down or be removed from this court." Priya remained calm. "Actually, I'm glad Mr. Kapoor is here, because I have one final piece of evidence." She nodded to Dev, who started a video. The courtroom screen showed Kapoor in his office, speaking to associates. "Kumar is too honest," he was saying. "We'll do to him what we did to the others. Plant some evidence, spread some rumors. By the time we're done, he'll wish he played ball with us." The video had been recovered from Mehra's files. As it played, Priya watched Kapoor's face turn pale. His lawyers were already reaching for their phones. But Priya wasn't done. This isn't just about corruption. The warehouse fire that killed 3 people, ordered by Vista Properties, the mysterious accidents that happened to property owners who wouldn't sell, all planned in these documents. She turned to face Kapoor directly. "You thought you could use the law as a weapon, but that's not what the law is for. The law exists to protect people, all people, not just the powerful." The head judge spoke. "Given the severity of these allegations and the strength of the evidence, I am ordering the immediate arrest of Vikram Kapoor and his associates. Furthermore, all Vista Properties assets are to be frozen pending investigation." Police officers moved in. Kapoor tried to run but found his way blocked. As he was led away in handcuffs, he shouted threats, but nobody was listening anymore. The judge continued. "As for Judge Kumar, all charges are dismissed. The evidence clearly shows this was a malicious prosecution. This court apologizes for the pain this has caused your family." Tears streamed down Anjali's face as she hugged her husband. Dev was already on his phone, spreading the news. In the back of the courtroom, reporters were rushing out to file their stories. Later that evening, the Kumar family gathered in their home. The phone hadn't stopped ringing. Old friends calling to apologize, neighbors coming by with food and support, journalists requesting interviews. "I got a call from the hospital board," Anjali said, smiling. "They want me back, with an apology and a promotion." Dev showed them his laptop. "The story's gone viral. People are coming forward with more evidence against Vista Properties. This is bigger than we thought." Judge Kumar sat quietly, looking at his family. "I thought my career was over," he said softly. "But you fought for me. You believed in me." Priya looked around their living room. The evidence wall was still up, but now it told a story of victory, not persecution. Her team of young lawyers had all received job offers from top firms, but they had decided to stay together, creating a new practice focused on fighting corruption. The doorbell rang. It was Arjun. "I was wrong," he said simply. "I should have stood by you. I understand if it's too late." Priya looked at him, then at her family. The past months had changed them all. They were stronger now, more determined. They had learned who their real friends were, what really mattered. "Come in," she said. "We're celebrating." That night, as the family sat together sharing a meal, Priya thought about everything they'd been through. They had lost things along the way: peace of mind, innocent trust, old relationships. But they had gained something too, the knowledge that truth could prevail, that justice was worth fighting for. Judge Kumar would return to the bench next week, more respected than ever. Anjali would go back to healing children. Dev had decided to start a watchdog organization to help other families fight corruption. And Priya? She had found her true calling. On her desk was a pile of letters from other families seeking help, other victims of powerful people who thought they were above the law. ready for the next fight? Dev asked, seeing her look at the letters. Priya smiled. Always. Someone has to stand up for what's right. Outside, the city was changing. The news of Vikram Kapoor's arrest had opened a flood of investigations. Other corrupt officials were resigning. Honest judges and officials were speaking out. It had started with one family refusing to back down. It would end with the system being cleaned up, one case at a time. Justice, Priya had learned, wasn't just about laws and courts. It was about people standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. That was what her father had taught her all along.